Okay, let's go forward. So thank you again for joining us for Get the Keys to Apply for Government Grants. I'm Rebecca Chauncey, an advisor here at the Illinois SBDC at Bill Bronzeville. This session is brought to you at no cost as it's funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the USSBA, the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and the Urban Juncture Foundation. And I am so happy to have today's presenters with us today as they have a wealth of knowledge to help you again to position yourself well to apply for government grants when they're available. And our presenters today include Kimberly Hill, who is the Chief Operating Officer at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and Tiffany Hawkins, Cannabis Loan and Grant Program Manager for the Office of Minority Economic Empowerment. That's also a part of the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And so without further ado, I'm going to have Kimberly start and we can learn what those real keys are to apply for government grants.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Hill. As Rebecca just stated, first I just want to thank you for inviting us today and giving us the opportunity to go through this information. Today we are going to talk a lot about the Illinois grant process. So part of what we're talking about, we're the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, but a lot of the information, you'll be able to use this with any state of Illinois agency, and I'll explain to you why as we go through the presentation. But also, a lot of the information is useful if you ever want to apply for a federal grant. So this is like a 101 to get you prepared for, looking for an application and some things that you might want to do with your business if you haven't done this already. So again, it's just kind of just like a preparation 101 training. So any questions that you have, we'll be able to go through those towards the end as well. So one thing to know about the state of Illinois is that if you have applied for a grant or have been interested in the state of Illinois grant over the last maybe 5 years, you'll probably hear this term called GATA. GATA is synonymous with Illinois grants right now because it's basically the rule book that we use in order to apply for a grant. So part of what I'm going to do is just go through some of those basics for GATA and give you a general understanding of what that is. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany, who will give you some like real life application tips when you're ready to submit an application. Okay, so what is GATA? GATA is the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act. That's what that stands for. And basically, this is a statute that was passed in 2015 that provided uniform guidance for all state of Illinois agencies to give us guidance on how we manage our grant programs. So a lot of times when people think about GATA, you think about the requirements on the applicant or the grantee. But these are requirements for the end-to-end grant process. So the pre-award, that's kind of what we call anything prior to actually receiving a grant award from us. So that's where, a lot of you would be at, which is preparation or pre-qualification, submitting an application, going through a review process for those applications, risk assessments, all of those things that we need to do before we actually issue an award to a successful applicant. And then even after that. So, one thing to kind of keep in mind is, some of the things we're going to be talking about right now are things you can prepare yourself for if you're interested in the grant process. But don't forget that GATA applies to the entire grant process. Right now, definitely put the focus on the pre-qualification, but just know, as you move forward, try to learn as much as you can about grant requirements. And if you received a grant before, you'll know a lot about this. If you've ever received a federal grant, of course, you're going to know a lot about GATA too, because again, what GATA did is it just adopted that federal uniform guidance on the state level. So one website that you can go to, and we will mention this over and over and over again, because all of the different pieces of data, you can always find them on our centralized website, which is grants.illinois.gov. So that website is listed there. Like I said, we'll talk about some other websites, but those are all going to be linked to grants.illinois.gov. And if you're familiar with the federal site, you'll see the similarities because the federal grant site is grants.gov. So again, you know, a lot of this is going to be modeled off of what happens federally. Okay, so what is pre-qualification? Pre-qualification is basically what you need to do to prepare yourself to submit a grant application. So the grant process, the GATA process, it requires for all applicants to be pre-qualified before you actually submit a grant application. So if there's an opportunity out there and you want to apply for it, what we're going to do on the state agency side is we're going to look up your information. We're going to go to what's called the GATA Grantee Portal, and we're going to see if your business is pre-qualified. If you're not pre-qualified, unfortunately, it's going to stop there. So all of the work that you did in your application, you know, if you hired a grant writer or you just, you know, spent hours and hours preparing this application, we will not even look at your application, unfortunately, because you have to be pre-qualified to even become a contender. So so the reason why it's important to get pre-qualified and to stay pre-qualified is so you could be ready when needed. So when we release a competitive opportunity, this is what you'll hear as a NOFO, a Notice of Funding Opportunity. We usually release those NOFOs for at least 30 days. So that means you'll have 30 days to prepare your application, learn about the program, and then prepare your application. And that's not a lot of time. I mean, if you're trying to prepare for a grant that maybe, you know, requires you to build some capacity or, you know, develop some partnerships or get some plans together, 30 days may not be a long period of time. So if you are already pre-qualified, that's one less thing that you have to do during that 30-day window. And one thing to note is that one of the components of pre-qualification is a SAM.gov registration, and that can take 3 to 4 weeks, and sometimes that's at the minimum for it to be approved. And it has to be approved in order, again, for us to even look at your application. So it's very important to get ready now. You may not be thinking about a grant, you know, program. That may be the furthest thing from your mind right now. But these things that you need to do to prepare and to get pre-qualified, they will not hurt your business at all. In fact, it will give you a chance to apply whenever the time comes, if there is going to be some funding out there. You know, there's a lot of funding that we're trying to get out to help restore Illinois, help get, you know, businesses back on track, help, you know, with some capital funding throughout the state. And, you know, if those qualifications, if you know, what we're looking for and where we're trying to get funding to, if you meet those requirements, you want to be ready to apply and get some of that funding. Another thing, again, like I mentioned, pre-qualification is the requirements. A lot of them are pulled from the federal requirements. So if you are eligible to receive a state of Illinois grant, that means you're also eligible to receive a federal grant. So it prepares you for that as well, too. So what are these pre-qualification requirements? So GATA requires for an entity to have a valid FEIN number. A lot of these things you may already have. A valid DUNS number, so that's a Dun and Bradstreet number. Have a current SAM.gov account. Not be on the federally excluded parties list. So, you know, that list is a federal naughty list, you would say. So if you are on that list, trust me, you will know. That's not something you have to go and find out if you're on that list. You're going to know if you are. It's because something has happened on the federal level that has excluded you from receiving federal funding. You have to be in good standing with the Illinois Secretary of State, if applicable. So most, you know, companies do need to be registered on the Illinois Secretary of State, with the Illinois Secretary of State. Local governments are usually the exception to that, but you have to make sure that you're in good standing. not be on the Illinois Stop Payment List. So this is a list that's very similar to that federally excluded parties list that I just mentioned. If you've ever received a grant from Illinois and, things weren't done the way that they were supposed to, we do have a system to put you on the stop payment list that prevents agencies from paying you until, that business or entity rectifies the situation. And that's what the Illinois Stop Payment List is. Again, if you're on the list, you will know it. And not be on a Department of Healthcare and Family Services Provider Sanctions list. Again, another list that if you're there, you're going to know you're there. It's not really something you have to go check and you'll find out. So once you have met all of those requirements, the last requirement is to actually register on the GATA grantee portal. So that is the website for the GATA grantee portal right there, grants.illinois.gov/portal. That is a centralized website that we use in the state of Illinois. Every state agency has access to this portal, and this is where we will go to verify that you're in compliance and that you are pre-qualified, again, if we receive your application. Okay, so just another look at what that process would be. So this is like if you're starting from scratch. You don't have anything yet. This is kind of what the progression would look like for you to become pre-qualified. So as we kind of go through this, you can, think about what you've already done and you'll know what your next steps would need to be. So step one is you need to obtain your federal employee identification number. That is your FEIN. A very important thing that is listed on each one of these steps is if it is free or if it's at a cost. So that is completely free for you. The next step is to register your business with the state of Illinois. So different ways you would do that. You would either register your LLC or your corporation with the state, or if you're like a partnership, or if you are a sole proprietor, you may need to register your business name with your local county. And there is a cost to that. And if you just take a look across, this is the only thing that there is a cost for, and it is a minimal cost. It is the only thing that there will be a fee for. Just keep that in mind. The next thing you want to do is you want to register with the Department of Revenue. So this isn't necessarily a GATA pre-qualification step, but just a step that you would need to do with your business to make sure that you can receive, funding from Illinois. The next thing is to obtain your DUNS number. So that is free for you again. The DUNS number, that is at dnb.com. That is a Duns and Bradstreet number, and it is free. It takes maybe like 2 to 3 days for that to turn around and for you to get that information, for you to get your DUNS number. Now, the next step is to register with the System Award Management. This is a federal website, and it's very similar to the GATA grantee portal, but this is the federal version. And it is sam.gov. That's actually the website as well, sam.gov. You'll hear people even refer to it as your sam.gov. So that is the website that you go to. Now, this is going to be like the step in the process that, unfortunately, it takes a while. It could take 3 to 4 weeks after you complete the information that they're requesting before it actually is approved. And again, that approval guarantees you, that approval is a step in the pre-qualification process, not just you registering, but them actually approving it. So this is, the biggest reason why working on these steps now is the most important. But one thing I do want to caution you about with the System Award Management, the SAM.gov, and there have been some changes over the last couple of months, but usually when you go to this site, what has happened in the past is it does make some of your contact information public. And unfortunately, anytime something is public, you're going to be, put in the list of the people who try to take advantage. So this is completely free. You have to renew this yearly. That is completely free. But there are a lot of companies out here who will call you as soon as you register and say, hey, it's going to take you 3 to 4 weeks, but we can get it done in 3 to 4 days for $700 or $500 or whatever the cost would be. Do not do that. They do not have any inside access to SAM.gov. They will take your money for nothing. You can do the work yourself. It is a simple registration. Read the instructions that they have. They have a help desk. Don't pay these people to help you with this part of the process. You can do that yourself. Even with the renewal, you may get this email that's saying you need to renew your SAM.gov. It's going to look just like it comes from SAM.gov, but as soon as it tells you to enter your credit card information, turn around and run. This is not a legitimate site. So that's just, something to keep in mind. And then the last thing is to register on the GATA Grantee portal. And that, again, is a free registration.
Excuse me, Kimberly,
Okay.
can you take one question? We
Yep.
had someone ask if you could explain what the DUNS number is.
So the DUNS number is it's called Dun & Bradstreet. It is a dnb.com, that is the website. It's basically like a registration for your business where you can develop like business credit. If you heard a lot of people talk about business credit, it's usually attached to their DUNS number. But it's just a registration for individual businesses. Sometimes like even with your FEIN number, if you have like different divisions that operate like their accounting systems differently, then each one of those businesses could have their own DUNS number. So it's just like another type of registration that you can use. And a lot of times government agencies look to see your DUNS number when you're applying for a grant. Rebecca, I don't know if there's anything else like from your end that you would want to add to that.
No, I was going to say essentially what you shared, and basically that those numbers are often referenced by lenders and potential business partners to determine the stability and reliability of a company. So thank you for answering that, Kimberly. And then I think we have one more related question before you advance the slide. Dondre mentioned that he got physical mail about SAM renewal. How much is that usually? That should be there's no cost.
There's no cost. If there was a cost in that mail that you received, if they indicated that there was a fee, that is not from SAM.gov. So just be very careful with that. I mean, there are so many websites that look exactly like it. Make sure that it is .gov at the end, and the main thing is going to be that they're charging you a fee, because that's ultimately what these businesses will be after is money. So, again, if they're saying, I don't care if it's $3 that they ask you for, like, it's free, don't pay anything. So if you got something in the mail, which I don't think SAM.gov sends physical mail, so I've never heard of that before. I don't work for them, so maybe they do. But to me, that's a flag right there. I haven't heard of physical mail being sent out. But if it says anything about a fee, don't pay it. That is not from SAM.gov. Now they may renew your membership. Like, I don't know if they're that fraudulent, but it's free. Anything that they can do, you can do, and it'll save you $400 to $700. And renewals are free.
Thanks, Kimberly. That's it for the related questions.
Okay. So let's just say you made it through all of these steps. You're registered on the portal, and you are pre-qualified. So now what? Now it's time to actually, go and see what's out there. Look and see what grants are out there. And honestly, you can do this now. You can go and look and see what grants are available. And I'm going to go through what these two, abbreviations are, because all we do is acronyms with the state. So you're going to hear a lot of that. But the next thing to do is, like I said, look and see what is out there. And this could be something you do even while you're working through pre-qualification. Because if you're new to grants, you may want to understand what is actually a grant. I know before I started working with DCEO, I had a complete misconception of what a grant was. I thought I could have like this novel idea about how to change my community, and there was somebody out there willing to give me some money for it. And I'm not going to say that's not true, but usually that's not how it works. Like a grant opportunity is something that the state of Illinois, we have a program that we intend to fund, and we are looking for people who can help with that program, with that scope. So we're going to tell you exactly what it is that we need, what we want you to do, what type of agency we want to apply for this, what areas sometimes we want you to provide that service in. You know, those ideas are already going to be part of that opportunity. So it's really good to like just see what the grant process even looks like. So you know, like, you know, not to waste your resources on something that, you know, may not be valuable for you in the long run. So the first thing to kind of talk about is the NOFO. So the NOFO, we mentioned it a little bit before, is the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And this is the public notice that we use as a state agency to announce our competitive grant opportunities. So we'll put that out there. Remember I said the minimum we can put it out there is 30 days. Sometimes it'll be 45 days, 60 days. You don't see it too much longer than that sometimes. But this is the announcement that we put out there. And what this announcement does is it gives you information about the program. It tells you a little background about the program, maybe, you know, if it's federal funding that we're passing through or some state funding. We let you know, like, you know, generally what we're trying to do with this program and how you can apply if you're eligible. So we may say non-for-profits are eligible, or for-profits, or, you know, certain type of organizations. Public health may ask for clinics, or, you know, all different types of businesses. The NOFO is going to list what type of eligible entity can apply. So the way that you can use the NOFO, especially prior to you actually being ready to submit an application, is again, so you can understand what the program information is, and then you'll just know what's out there, have an idea of what type of departments are within the state. You know, sometimes like the bigger departments we're used to, like the DCEOs, the DHSs, but there's multiple agencies out there. So it'll just give you an understanding of what the world of agencies looks like. And another thing you can do is you can look at the CSFA. So that is the Catalog of State Financial Assistance. If you're familiar with the federal grant landscape at all, you'll know that they have a CFDA, and that is basically the federal equivalent of this. Our CSFA lists all of our awards. So that's also where you're going to find the NOFOs, but you're going to see any grant awards that we give, even the non-competitive ones, and you'll be able to see all active grants that we've given out. So all of the grantees right now, all of the different businesses and local governments, et cetera, throughout the state that's receiving grant funding from any state of Illinois agency is going to be listed on this site. And it just gives you, you know, we're trying to be transparent, you know, the T and GATA, you know, so you can see what's out there. And this is a way that you can use this information. You can use it, again, to see what grants we have, just have a basic understanding of what, you know, what type of programs we're offering. You can also see, like, what organizations are receiving grants, like what type of organizations are receiving the grants that you're interested in, because that can help, like, maybe give you some information on what you may need to do to position yourself to be a grantee as well. So maybe, you know, this one has more capacity, or maybe they have, I don't know. It depends on whatever grant you're looking for. It just helps you understand, like, well, who's out here receiving this money? Then if it's a very large grant, like maybe it's a huge grant, you know, $10 million or a $15 million grant for services across the state, and you're just not at that level to do that. You know, you want to focus on, you know, this particular part of Chicago or Champaign or something like that. You know, maybe you can partner with them. Maybe you really care about that program. You've been working with that type of a program. Maybe you can reach out to them and see how you can be a sub-grantee or a partner. So a lot of ways that you can use the CSFA just to make sure, like, you know, that you understand what's going on out there. Okay, so the last thing here is just the site on where you can find the CSFA. And again, that's where you see all active programs, funded programs, competitive opportunities. And this is the long site right here, but You can always go to grants.illinois.gov, and there's going to be a link that says CSFA. You can click there. That'll get you there much easier than trying to write this down. Another thing is if you are looking for DCEO specific grants, because remember everything else is going to be from every state agency, but DCEO, we also advertise our grants through our website. We do put it on the CSFA, but also the website, our social media. So if you want to follow us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or Twitter, we always try to let people know about what programs are going on within the agency. And last, if you do have some questions, here are a few people in general you can reach out to. So when you register on the GATA Grantee portal, you are going to be assigned a cognizant state agency. That could be any agency. It may not be DCEO, it could be DHS, whatever agency either you say like, hey, I want to work, this is the agency I want to apply. I want to apply for grants from. They may be your cognizant, or it may just be randomly assigned. But that's going to be the person who really has access into your pre-qualification status. So if you have any questions, that's like your first point of contact for GATA related questions. And their contact information is going to be listed on the GATA Grantee portal. If you have grant specific questions, so you look at a NOFO and you don't understand, one part of the program eligibility, reach out to the contact that's listed on the CSFA or that's listed in that NOFO. They're going to have your grant specific information, and they can answer those grant specific questions. And if all else fails, you can email DCEO because we are willing to help. And you can email us at ceo.gata@illinois.gov, and we'll either help you or we'll point you to the person who can help you. A couple other things. So again, my name is Kimberly Hill. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. I listed my phone number and email address here if you wanted to reach out. Jared Walkowitz is our Chief Accountability Officer. I did list his email here as well. Jared is responsible for our accountability office. He is our Deputy Director for our DCO's Accountability Officer, and basically does all things GATA and grants within our agency. So he is the go-to person for grants now. And I will turn it over to Tiffany.
Okay, Kim, thank you for that segue into my part of the presentation. First, thank you all for having us here today. We're excited to come and present to you on what we feel are key components to successfully completing a grant application. I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. And Kim and I do a bit of a tag team that we feel has worked very well for us, because she gives you the core criteria of GATA pre-qualification, and then my component comes into basically giving you the best practices for applying for government grants. I've been with the state 22 years in October. The majority of my tenure here has been dedicated to grant management. I'm the person that reviews the grant applications that you submit, or one of the people that reviews the grant applications that you submit, and also one of the individuals that helps to develop the notice of funding opportunities, or NOFOs, that you apply to. So I'm coming to you from two perspectives, and what we see some grant applications are missing when they submit them to us. And so this is our opportunity to give you a little bit of a heads up, because on the back end, you never know, like, oh, I applied for this grant, I don't know why I got it. And you may not necessarily know what your application could have been deficient in. So that's what we'll be discussing in this part of the presentation. And so I've developed like 8 tips or practices that I think will be beneficial for you as you complete a notice of funding opportunity. So my first one is You have to make sure that your organization is GATA pre-qualified, which Kim went over in great detail before I stepped in. And this is also a deterrent sometimes before your application can even be reviewed. We look in the system to make sure that your application meets that criteria. So if you are not GATA pre-qualified, that automatically disqualifies you from the process. And you don't know how many times we have it where we have to reject a high number or disqualify a high number of applications because they aren't GATA pre-qualified. You don't know how many times where applicants have put together a great application, but we can't even review it because they haven't met that crucial step of being GATA pre-qualified. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, read the requirements of the NOFO. That's so important. Kim spoke today about different organizations being targeted populations for certain grant funding opportunities. So if you are, let's say, an educational institution, but you're applying for a community-based grant, you would not be eligible for that grant. So if you really read or take time to read the requirements of the NOFO, that'll give you a lot of leeway in what's allowable and not allowable when it comes to applying for this certain grant. And I think making a checklist is crucial because a lot of times we do ask for a lot of information. We've tried to standardize the process over the years where certain grants or state grants, we are asking for the same things, but for some we're asking for a little bit more that are, critical to what the program is looking for or what the program requirements are. So there may be some differentiation there. But if you make that checklist, you can go through and say, hey, okay, I submitted this. I submitted A, I submitted B, I submitted C, because there's a lot of times also where we've had to ding applicants or once again, disqualify some applications because the applications weren't complete. So my number two is read the requirements of the NOFO, make sure you're complying, and make you a checklist to make sure you submit all the required information. Tip number three is addressing all the information that's requested in the NOFO. I know you want to tell us, or applicants want to tell us everything about their organization, so we have a complete picture of what you do, what you've done, but we really only need what's requested in the NOFO. Because a lot of times when you provide additional information and it's not relevant to what we ask for, we may not read it. It may get passed over. So just make sure you're addressing all the information that's requested in the NOFO. If we didn't ask for it, it's not going to give you any additional points. So I just want to point that one out there as well. And then tip number four, this comes to the budget. The budget is the key or one of the key components of your grant application, because this tells us basically how you will be or how you plan to expend your grant funds. So if you're, let's say, requesting $250,000, and I'm just throwing that number out there, and there are only certain allowable expenses. So let's say the grant is a capital grant and it's just geared towards construction or design and engineering, but you've also included personnel costs or fringe benefit costs. Now we have to get into where can we even review this budget, because now you've submitted ineligible expenses and they can't be considered as part of the actual budget application. So it's just making sure that your budget aligns with what's allowable in the NOFO. And each NOFO will detail what allowable expenses are. And if there's something that you have questions about, especially before you submit the application, more often than not, there is contact information there we're trying to do better and create FAQs now to address certain questions. But just if you have questions about a budget item, instead of submitting it, ask a question or reach out to program staff prior to submission to make sure that all your costs are allowable. Because ineligible expenses may result in your application being disqualified or you're receiving a lower score. Number 5, submit our requested documentation and any subsequent backup requested. And I listed this one here because in reviewing certain applications, and it even ties back to the budget, there are times where the budget includes not only a table of line item expenses, but also behind that different categorical expenses where you're breaking down what those line item expenses are reflective of. And sometimes in that descriptor, there is certain backup documentation that is requested. Like for construction, there may be a requirement for copies of the bid, an estimate, photographs. And so if you just submit a budget, well, only thing you did was submit the line item expenses, but you didn't submit that backup documentation, that's a ding on you. So that may result in your application marked as deficient and may result in a low score when it's reviewed, because the reviewer will be looking for that backup documentation, that criteria. So make sure when you're submitting your application, look at all the documentation, read the subparts, and make sure if this says A, B, and C is required, you submit A, B, and C. Don't think, oh, I just listed that there and I don't have to submit it. No, if we ask for it, we need it. So submit our requested documentation. Number 6 is make sure all the required documentation that requests signatures are signed and are signed by the authorized signature. Now, if an application is not signed, it's like if you're going to apply for a loan. If you don't sign that loan, it's not valid. It's the same with application. So we need you to sign these applications. You don't know how many times that we get applications and they're not signed. So that means that you haven't actually said there are certain criteria that we ask you to certify that you're going to do. There are certifications that we're requesting. And if you don't sign the application, it's basically saying you may not be compliant with that. So a signature is important, and also make sure that it's signed by the appropriate person. Because like for the budget, for example, we ask for the authorized signature and maybe the CFO. If there's not a CFO, someone equivalent to the CFO or providing an explanation as to why the CFO isn't available to sign. So we need something, but just don't say, oh, I don't need to sign that. So as I said, if we don't have those certain signature requirements, your application may be deemed incomplete or ineligible. So please keep that in mind when completing applications. And number 7, this is critical. You don't know how many times we've dealt with the fact that applications have been submitted late. You have to submit your application by the required deadline. These are competitive grant applications, so we cannot allow you to submit an application past the deadline. If it's due at 5 o'clock and you submit it at 5:04, you have submitted it past the application deadline. And we have to hold firm with that, because it's not fair to all the other individuals or applicants that submitted their grant application on time and then allow you to submit your application late. And so that's a standardized practice that we have to adhere to. If your application is received late, it will be disqualified. And we've had that happen, like, well, I submitted it on the day, but you submitted it past the deadline. So if the application has a stated deadline of 5 o'clock p.m. close of business, and our offices close at 5, and your application comes in, let's say you mailed it and it comes in the next day. When we do our counter or tabulation, if it's not there, we cannot review that application. So please keep that in mind. And also due to the pandemic, due to COVID, we're also doing a lot of digital applications. Some people are uploading their applications and submitting them. And my advice is to submit them early, because you never know what type of technical difficulties you may experience. I've had that where I'm trying to get a report done and my system crashes and I'm like, OMG. So now I have to get this submitted and I may be late. And so if I get it done early though, that gives me time to address certain things or technical difficulties that may arise. So my advice when submitting your application, submit it early, just so it gives you the opportunity to navigate any technical difficulties. If you have to drop it off, any traffic, and it gives you a little breathing room as well, because you know you got it in on time. And you know this will not be a disqualifier for you, because a lot of people, I hate to say it, get disqualified because of that. And we have perused them like, man, this was a good application, but we can't review them because they were submitted late. And number 8, this is very important. Please note that submission of an application does not guarantee an award. This is a competitive application process. These grants are reviewed for certain review criteria. Just because you submit an application doesn't mean that the state is obligated to award a grant. And then we also have limited funds. It's like the cookie jar isn't, it does run out. So we have to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to have their applications reviewed. And we also have to make sure that we are aligning the application review with the review criteria. So just because you submit an application doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get the award. So I think these 8 tips will, and I went over them kind of quickly, but just to give you an opportunity to ask any questions if you have them, but also just, we put these together because we field a lot of phone calls from applicants who are upset because for them, they really need these grant funds and they think they put together this perfect application. But these are like 8 of the items that I find that applications can be deficient in, and you may not think that they're major. Oh, that's a little issue, but it turns into a major issue. So that's all that I have here. If you have any questions, this is my work cell. We're working remotely right now. This is my work email. And Rebecca, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. And before I get into how you can contact us, please let us know if you have any questions. I don't see any questions in the Q&A section nor in the chat. So what I will do, just in case anyone is unable to type at this point, I'll give you the opportunity to raise your hand, and if you have a question, then you can unmute yourself and ask that question. Or as usual, Tiffany and Kimberly have given all the details, and oftentimes people don't have extra questions because they're so thorough in sharing the knowledge that you need to position yourself well to apply for government grants, specifically on the state level. So are there any questions before we close for the afternoon? You can raise your hand. I have given everyone an opportunity. If you want to just ask your question, you can unmute yourself and you can do so. Okay, well, It looks like you don't have any questions. That's fine. Well, let me thank again. We want to say many, many thanks to Kimberly Hill and Tiffany Hawkins for presenting everything that you needed to know, those perfect keys to apply for government grants. I will share a recording of today's training with a follow up email that includes a survey about today's training. And if you enjoyed this one, we definitely want to hear your feedback so we can continue to provide you with the best sessions to help you um, excel in your business. Additionally, I'm going to drop in the chat. We at the Illinois SBDC at Bill Bronzeville are really excited about our first Entrepreneur Summit that will take place next week during the lunch hour. So if you were interested in joining that, you can up, you can register for events at billbronzeville.com/events and go from there. Additionally, if you have questions and want to work with our Small Business Development Center, as you can see, you can email us, visit and sign up via our website, or give us a call. And then while Kimberly and Tiffany shared their direct contact information, you could also reach out to the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity via email, the website that's on your screen, and then you could call them as well. So it looks like there isn't anything else. So continue to have a wonderful day, stay well, and thank you again for your time and attention. You have an extra 10 minutes in your schedule, so I'm sure you'll make good use of it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.